The little book, Flush, is a strange jewel. Not quite a biography, not quite a novel, not quite satire. It is a life story told through eyes, nose, and instinct of a dog. Yet beneath the fur and paws, the book is really about class, freedom, love, and the invisible structures that shapes human reality. Flesh was written in 1933 by Virginia Woolf. On the surface, it is the biography of Spaniel, owned by poet Elizabeth Barrett Browning. But Woolf, clever fox, that she was uses dog's perspective to quietly dissect Victorian society. A dog can smell what humans hide. Let's walk through the book as if we were following the Spaniel nose through rooms, streets, and ideas. Flesh enters the world in the countryside, among hills and hedges, and the scent-rich wildness of nature. He was born into aristocratic dog lineage, a cocker spaniel with proud pedigree. A tiny fragments from the text captures this early world. Flush was born in the spring. The sentence is deceptively simple. Spring means beginning, instinct, fertility, life in motion. Wolf deliberately places him in nature before introducing the rigid artificial world of Victorian society. In the countryside, Flush experiences life through smell. Wolf repeatedly emphasizes the sensory richness of dog's perception. See, this human lives in a world of sight and language. Dogs live in universe of scent. This is not animal description, this it's philosophy. Wolf is suggesting that human consciousness is narrow. The world is far larger than our tidy categories of reason and etiquettes. Let's understand life through sensation rather than abstractions. The countryside therefore symbolizes freedom and instincts. Flesh is gifted to Elizabeth Barrett, who lives in a dark, heavy house on Wimpole Street in London. Immediately, the atmosphere shifts. Natures become walls, freedom becomes etiquette. Elizabeth Barrett herself is sickly confined to her rooms by illness and by her tyrannical father. She lives surrounded by books, poetry, and strict Victorian rules. Flesh senses something humans ignore. The house is a cage. Wolf hints at this through sensory language, dust, stray layers, or muffled street. A short line captures the emotional tone. The room was dark and shut in. The darkness is both literal and symbolic. Elizabeth Barrett's life is controlled by her father. She cannot marry, she cannot leave easily, she is physically and socially imprisoned. And Flush and Elizabeth mirror each other. The dog is restricted by leash and walls, the woman is restricted by patriarchal authority. This parallel is the core structure of book. Flush learns class society. Now Woolf begins her quiet satire of Victorian class system. Flush begins being a pedigree spinalist treated like aristocracy. Servants admire him, people respect his breed. Yet when he encounters street dogs in London, a different world appears. Dirty alleys, mongrels, poverty. Flush cannot understand why some dogs pampered while others starve. The confusion is deliberate. Woolf uses Stock's innocent perspective to expose something absurd. Class hierarchy is irrational. To a dog, all dogs are dog. To society, lineage determines value. Flush experiences shock when he meets lower class dogs of London. Their lives are rough, chaotic, violent. Through the dog bewilderment, Woolf quietly critiques the rigid class divisions of Victorian England. Like the kidnapping, and one of the most dramatic episodes arrives when Flush is kidnapped. Victorian London actually had a crime trade involving stolen pets. Thieves would steal dogs and demand ransom from wealthy owners. Flush is dragged from the respectable world of Wimpole Street into the slums of St. Giles. There is Wolf social commentary sharpens. Flush sees poverty firsthand, filth, hunger, overcrowded rooms. The genteel Victorian would pretend these places do not exist. Flush cannot ignore them. A brief line captures the dog's shock. The smell was horrible. The sentence carries enormous meaning. To humans, the slum might look unpleasant. To Flush, whose nose rules his world, it is overwhelming chaos. disease, decay, humanity packed together in misery. Woolf forces the reader to confront the hidden underside of polite society. Eventually, Elizabeth Barrett pays ransom and Flesh is returned, but the experience changes him. Now he has seen another world. Love enters the room. Enter the poet Robert Browning. He begins secretly visiting Elizabeth Barrett. Flesh immediately dislikes him. Dogs often represent instinctual judgment. Fleshy senses that Browning will disrupt the stable orders of life, and he does. Robert Browning encourages Elizabeth to rebel against her father's authority. Love begins quietly growing between them, and first, he is Flush, he is jealous. The dog who once received all affection must now share it. But something larger unfolds. Elizabeth gradually becomes stronger, more alive. Love gives her courage. Eventually she does something radical. She runs away with Browning and marries him. Flush, of course, goes with her. The couple escapes to Italy, Florence. This shift in geography mirrors a shift in spirit. London was oppressive. Italy is open, sunlit, free. A small line captures the transformation. Flush ran free. Those three words contain the emotional climax of the book. In Italy, Elizabeth is healthier. Robert is happy. Flush no longer lives under rigid Victorian rules. The leash disappears. Woolf uses this movement to symbolize liberation from social constraint. Victorian England represented discipline, hierarchy, repression. Italy represents spontaneity, warmth, freedom. Flush experienced life more fully than ever. The final years, time moves quietly forward. Flush grows older. Elizabeth and Robert have a child. Life becomes domestic and peaceful. Eventually, Flush dies. Wolf treats the moment gently without melodrama. For Dog, death is not philosophical tragedy. It is simply the end of sensation. But his life leaves a lingering thought. Flush lived in two worlds: the rigid Victorian order of London, the free emotional world of Italy. Through the dog's life, Woolf shows the transformations of Elizabeth Barrett Browning herself from imprisoned daughter to independent woman. Symbols running through the book. The nose in one of the most fascinating motifs, like human rely on intellect, flesh relies on smell. Like she uses this difference to challenge human arrogance. Knowledge does not only come from reasons. Animal perceive realities that humans sometimes miss. Another recurring symbol is the leash. Whenever Flush is restrained, Elizabeth is socially constrained. When Flush runs freely in Italy and Elizabeth escapes patriarchal control, their lives echo each other. Finally, there is a symbol of pedigree. Flush, noble's breed, mirrors Victorian obsession with bloodlines and class status. Wolf subtly mocks this obsession by showing how meaningless it appears from a dog's point of view. And your question is like why Wolf wrote the book. At the time, Wolf was known for complex modernist novels like Mrs. Dalloway, and To the Lighthouse. Like Flush was playful by comparison, but beneath the painful surface lies critique. Woolf was deeply interested in class inequity, women's oppression, the hidden absurdities of social convention. By telling the story through a dog, she could examine these topics from an outsider perspective. A dog notices things which humans normally normalize. Flesh becomes a philosophical observer of society, and the deeper meaning, like strip away the furthest perennial wagging tail, and the book becomes a meditation on freedom. Elizabeth Barrett begins trapped by family authority, Victorian gender rules, physical illness, Flesh being trapped by leashes, houses, social expectations, even on animals, like both gradually move toward freedom. The Like the arc of the story is liberation, yet Wolf avoids preaching. She lets the transformation happens quietly through scenes and the sensory impressions. And what is the crux of the book? In the end, Flush teaches something deceptively simple. Civilization builds cages, class builds cages, gender roles build cages. Animals do not understand these cages. Flesh therefore becomes the perfect guide to expose them. And by watching the world through a dog instinct, Wolf reveals how strange human society is. A spinel wandering through Victorian England ends up revealing the invisible machinery of power, class, and freedom. And like many Wolf's work, the book leaves a quite philosophical whisper behind. Like life is richer when it is lived with instinct, affection, and freedom, rather than rigid social rules. The dog knew that from the beginning. Humans took an entire lifetime to learn it. So that was the overview or the story of Flush.